Okay. Motion on the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, item 1 is to continue our review of the available testing data. I don't know if there's anything new this week, this month, but we didn't make it through all of our data last time, so.
Okay. You should,
We
yeah.
talked about the AP scores, that's as far as we got.
You said it's revised things too, right?
What does met B mark mean?
Benchmark. It's the proficiency level set by College Board and by the state.
Met B as in, just that's what it's called?
Benchmark,
Yeah, met B on.
benchmark, BM. That's right.
Shorthand.
Which says,
tab is it?
it's on the, where it says math, there's a met B mark.
Oh, yeah, that's Bob trying to keep the cells smaller, so he's just shortening the,
The bookmark.
Which one?
benchmark.
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 Yeah.
Okay, so
Med
We
B
talked
equals benchmark.
we talked
That's
about
it.
the AP.
Convoluted
No,
diagram.
I don't have a gavel here.
Throw things.
So I'm just talking, we talked about the AP scores last time, and I'm just looking through the report here, and the next in line would be SATs. But I don't know, do we need to discuss those? Those aren't, technically, those aren't new, to us. We did talk about those, I think, unless there is something new there that you would like to mention.
Just the average score was a little bit higher last year than the year before. Roughly in line, the benchmark, which is the level of proficiency. So the College Board sets the benchmark at, I think it's 480 for math and 530 for the English test, the EBRW test. I had that backwards, but those scores, it's like if you achieve that level, they consider you to have met proficiency levels. So that's what they call it, benchmark. That's what the term means. And our numbers were roughly the same year to year in meeting that benchmark on that one single day assessment, the SAT assessment for the state. We also just, for what it's worth, today happened to be PSAT day, and part of our process to get these scores up is to have the kids take the PSAT exams freshman, sophomore, and junior year, so that when they take the SAT exam, which is a computer-based exam, they'll have a little more familiarity with the sort of style of the questions they're gonna see on those tests. Our students don't generally take tests that are the style of the SAT, PSAT test, and they struggle a little bit with the kinds of questions that they see. That's one of the things that we've done over the last, I think this is the 3rd year in a row we've done PSATs now, to give the kids a chance to practice and to give us some data as well.
Do they traditionally do well when they have it for 3 years in a row? I don't know whether I think I read somewhere that it diminishes off the other way after a while. But if you've had the experience and it goes up, then I'm cool with that, it's not a problem.
I think it's more after they take it like 5 or 6 times, that's when you start to see, that's at least what I've read in studies, is that after 5 or 6 times, the scores either plateau or they don't show the increases that you would typically see when kids take it 2 to 3 times.
This is the SAT
With
specifically.
the SAT and taking that standardized test, so that PSAT.
Okay. Just curious, because that's kind of was genuine in the back of my head. And those are expensive, those tests aren't cheap either, if I remember correctly.
What do they cost? They're not, I wanna say,
That's about $50.
Oh, that's not too bad.
what do we pay for the PSAT say?
Just roughly.
I wanna say it's $16 a
Yeah.
student,
No,
but
that's-
I'm not
okay.
sure. I
It's
don't
pretty
know,
cheap.
sticking out my
Yeah.
mind.
Yep. And they were on paper. I mean, just to give you an idea of one of the challenges we face, the freshmen, every year when we have new freshmen, we have to show them how to complete a bubble sheet. We have students come in that have, honest to God, have never taken a test with a bubble sheet in their life. They have no idea how to fill out a Scantron. So that's part of it, is we want them to do that, so if they see further tests in that style, the more that they do them, the more they see those. It's not, I think, if you're not working for the College Board, you probably don't, think those are the best kind of tests. I would agree with that, but it is what we have, so we wanna get them ready for the state test. But they don't know how to do it. And the state test, of course, is also now a computer-based test, which we know we believe with our kids is gonna be the way to go. And we think it's also gonna be required, fairly soon to take it on the computer-based test. So,
Okay, I'm thinking down, okay, so next in line is PSAT.
Yep.
So let's,
Mhm.
that's that, and, so thanks.
yeah, the PSAT scores are there.
Okay, sorry.
You can see those, we sort of look at those more, I look at them more as an individual thing than I worry about, what the cohorts do, because, one grade versus another is different. I just sat on the sophomore class meeting yesterday, and they were talking about the differences between this year's sophomore group versus last year's sophomore group, and with only 140 or so kids in each group, you're gonna see those variations. So, always a little worried about that, but we do look, we have the scores, and we can use the numbers to look at, we had like last year, 2017 to 2018, we saw an increase in English, but a decrease in the math. The kids achieving that level at the 11th grade level, and you can go through all those and see what the differences are. But we want to look at the data, and we'll drop the 2019 data in there when we have it, which should be
Yes, I do.
December.
December.
So a couple of months, we should have those scores back. And then what we really want to do is look at those scores from an individual basis and try to figure out what we can do to impact the test scores going forward of our kids that are close to making that benchmark level, so they can bump their scores up.
Are we still required to have every student take the test?
The SAT, yes. Yep.
That skews results as well, because kids that have no interest in pursuing higher education,
Yep.
never mind some that may be challenged and not able to
Yep.
accurately perform, that's certainly gonna skew the results of any test scores we have.
Yep.
And not just for Sanborn, but obviously everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you have
We had a number of kids sitting in the office today whose scores got invalidated for one reason or another, because they weren't taking the test seriously.
The PSAT
The
scores
PSAT
for today.
scores, yeah.
Wow.
So I have a question on the PSAT. Are these grade norm? So is a ninth grader taking a different level test than the 11th grader, or are they not grade norm?
the 9th grade kids take the PSAT 8-9,
Okay,
and so it's at the top, but the 9th graders take the PSAT 8-9, and the other kids take the regular straight up PSAT.
okay, so then that would explain the step function differential getting to the 10th. It's a higher level math test.
Yep, it's a higher level math test, and it's, like I said, taking my different cohorts of kids, so there's gonna be some variation there. And, it's a different test every year, and the environment's different. There's a million factors that can play into that. I mean, today I thought went extremely smoothly. We had only a couple kids that decided they just couldn't control themselves with their phones. But you always have a kid
There are
who,
adults like that too,
I know, we had kids who took the entire test in 22 minutes, so.
Yeah.
That happens too, so I had a chat with him, but that's, one of the difficulties are the kids that say, I'm not going to college, even though we talk to them and encourage them and meet with them and all that, and say, this is what this is for, it's a different thing. It's a really difficult thing to convince some of these kids to take that test seriously.
Do tech schools look at SAT scores or PSAT?
No idea.
Just, out of curiosity, let's say a kid wants to be a plumber, for example, and is gonna go into a trade school.
Yeah.
When he finishes, do they bring it into account?
No.
Okay, just curious, again,
I
just
mean,
a
I've
curiosity.
never encountered one, so I won't make a blanket statement that none of them do, but we have not encountered one that looks at those. On the positive note, what our seniors did today, while the 9th to 11th graders were taking their PSATs, seniors were able to do a career exploration day, and we had 42 seniors go off and visit Manchester Community College and Southern New Hampshire University. So kids who may or have not been interested in college, and may have been the kids who didn't take the PSATs seriously when they were juniors, kind of got a different look at like, oh, this is what college could be like, and this looks pretty cool, and I can see myself here. So, and we took them to both the 2-year school and the 4-year school, so they could see the difference and hear the differences in prices, and the information was very well received from reports from the chaperones that went, so
They even ran into some Sanborn alumni
Yeah,
while they
some
were there.
Sanborn
both places.
alumni, yeah.
Which is always great for the kids,
Yeah,
because then
yeah.
they get to see their,
That they can see
Their
their peers
peers,
performing
right.
there, and
Correct.
now all of a sudden they can see themselves there, so that was exciting. It's the first time we've ever done it, and we will definitely be doing it again. We could have probably filled another bus, we filled one bus, yeah. Some of our kids have a hard time turning permission slips in on time, so we
Right.
didn't have enough time
and
to
then they're
get a
mad that
second
there's no
bus.
room on, why didn't you have two buses? Well, we only had enough kids
But
signed
we
up for
only
one.
got
Why would we get two?
My car.
Yeah.
So did you,
Well,
I
it's
mean,
Saturday.
we also now have an interventionist math position, which is new
Right,
this
I
year.
remember that in the budget.
And one of her, her task is she's looking at data that includes things from these pools and how she can help kids who are on that bubble cross over so that they are meeting a benchmark. So she's focusing primarily on 9th and 10th grade. So PSAT will factor into some degree, PACE to some degree, NWEA quite a bit, because we've got quite a lot of data on NWEA. And it'll be a little while before we start to see her work impacting things like this, if she's gonna be starting with 9th and 10th grade, but it's incredibly targeted intervention in a way that we haven't done before.
Right.
And reading will be something similar, we've just gotta free up the person who's gonna be doing that from some of the other things that they're tagged into that are special ed related right now, so.
And measuring those skills more precisely would look at us looking more deeply at NWEA and their offerings for us, because it used to be very, you take the test, you figure out where you are, and they've gotten to the point where they're now able to sort of get more granular with what's going on. So in math, if they're specifically having an issue with fractions, or if they're specifically having an issue with geometry, they could parse that out further. So we're looking at getting some more capabilities from NWEA to help us with some of that work with the interventionists, so that instead of them sort of approximating where the kids are, they can really diagnostically decide this is where we need to start you.
So the tests help determine which student needs.
For NWEA, yeah, which is not this data, this is more of the standardized sort of culminating things, where NWEA is more of a diagnostic, trying to figure out where you are now, predicting where you might be in a few years, or in a few months, or to a year, and then helping the instructors figure out, okay, to get you from this point to the next point, this is what we need to do to put in between, so.
And just to interject, the parents get a printout of that, the NWEA, and it tells us all that information too. So the parents receive that as well, so it is nice, because then the parents.
So they also direct.
They
where
can see
you
where their
is
child
proceeding.
struggles, or where they're accelerating, or where, they're falling behind. So it is nice for parents to see that as well.
Which can prompt some good conversations between parents and teachers to say, hey, I noticed that I'm seeing this on the score, you've seen the same thing, and what are you guys, what do we do about it, right? What can you do at school, what are we doing at home? I mean, we see that at home too,
Right.
as a parent, we get the same reports on
Or
our
was it
kids
just a
and
bad
adults.
day? Were they just having a bad day?
Sure, Right.
That's always a question too, and it is nice as parents to see that as well. It's good.
So the PACE, moving on to the PACE results here.
The PACE results are, they're there, those numbers are there. The PACE test is a test that's created within the state by New Hampshire educators. It's a different assessment every year. It's one of them.
What grade levels?
These are primarily at 9th and 10th grade.
Okay,
This year, there's a chemistry assessment coming online this year, and I wanna say there's maybe an algebra 2 level one this year.
Right, yep.
That's coming on. I've got it here listed as math 1, math 2. It's actually at the state level. That really should say algebra 1 and geometry, because that is what the assessments are. That's just using our terminology kind of automatically. And those tests are more performance-based. They run over a couple of days. They tend to have a really broad rubric. They're scored on a 0 to 4 type of scale. That's the numbers you see there. On the average, it's 0 to 4. As such, I think it's tricky to gauge one year versus another on that test. I'm not totally sure how you would do that. And haven't really looked at because the tests can be very dissimilar year to year. it's, the numbers are there, but it does give us a check. I think the more valuable data is when we look at the data versus the rest of the state. How are we lining up versus the state? And, you know, are our scores lined up? Are we getting the same kind of results that other schools are getting in the same kinds of subjects? Because then, as we see the vagaries and differences in the actual assessment tools in each subject, if we're falling behind the state or gaining on the state, I think that gives us a little better read on where we're at. And that data this year we didn't get. So that was kind of a bother to me. I don't know what.
The whole
happened
State
there.
Department of Ed is undergoing a major reconfiguration. They just found out before I got here that a couple of key people have left. So I don't know what's going on up at the state with that. They're viewing their work differently than it's been done in the past. I don't know what that means for us. So there's a lot less communication coming our way. I know that there are PACE scores and New Hampshire statewide assessment scores that students in grades 3 through 8 took, that the scores are embargoed, which means I can't share them even though I have looked at them. But for me to figure out what our kids are, it's like, here's the hay bale, go find 3 pieces of red thread, and it's like, and the hay is red, so good luck to you. So we're waiting to see what the state's gonna give us, and I've got a meeting in 2 weeks to figure out if they're gonna be able to give us any information on that. But the nice thing to know about the PACE data in relation to some of the other standardized stuff, in looking longitudinally across our information, we talked about this last year, is that our numbers are coming in, if you look at overarching numbers longitudinally, our numbers for PACE are coming in close to performance as they are in some of the standard things, so that even though there are different ways to measure the performance, we're coming up with similar results, which is a good thing.
Is there any funding attached to any of these tests that we can't get a hold of?
Not
Just curious, again, I'm just trying to,
Not outright, there are, ways for us to look at additional grants and things to provide for students, but it's not necessarily tied to the test scores like they do in some other states, and tying things to test scores was more about teacher evaluations than funding for us.
okay.
Title I depends on percentage of poverty in the district, so that's not about test scores, but then depending on what your students are scoring, they could or could not be eligible for services under Title I, but that's, for us, it's more of a K-8 thing than it would be in high school.
Thank you.
So I just have a question on the data sets. So just starting with the Algebra 1, 179 people took it. The average score was 1.43 out of what? What is the max score? And then pound 3 plus, what is that?
Sorry, where are you?
The third column?
What's the
The
code?
number that we're over 3. So that would be the number
Ah,
that's
okay.
3 or above.
Got it.
So if you wanna look at that as a proficiency level,
Okay.
okay?
And what is that as a percent, right?
And then the next column would be the
Okay.
percent, yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Made perfect sense when I did it 500 times. Right, I'm looking at it.
I figured there was a key to it, but I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
There is a method to your madness.
Well, it is madness, yes. Because it takes some time to put this all together, but one of the things we're really trying to do is create profiles for teachers to use. So like the sophomore teachers this year got a single sheet profile of every student that basically has every test score they've ever scored through the last 3 years, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. In a single location, all color coded. Takes a mountain of time to do it, but they tell me that they're super helpful because they can look just at English or they can look across everything, and it's sort of a color field that they see. So they don't necessarily know what a number is in a box, but if that box is yellow, it's basically blue, green, yellow, or red. And when they can see the colors, they get a rough idea where the kids are. And it's broken out by their course competencies, their PACE scores, their SAT scores, PSAT scores, NEWA scores, going back to SBAC and SAS scores from previous years, everything. So they get this huge pile of data all in one spot for each of their individual kids.
So blue is cool and red is not.
Well, not every test has blue, some of them only have green. So, there's a little bit of that, but it gives them a broad look, because one of the things that I think is really most important about data from driving changes to instruction with individual students, of course, is to make the data accessible. And one of the things that we do a lousy job in education doing, I believe, is making data usable to teachers. You can have all the data in the world, but if they don't have any idea what it is, the teacher they can't tell you what it is. You might as well white collect it.
Can't learn from it.
So if it's not driving any information for them or giving them some skill-based information, it's not gonna do them any good for them to work on. So one of the reasons we really pushed the NEWA test early in the year with our freshman kids in particular is we don't have consistent data, and I don't do profiles intentionally with our ninth graders, is because we don't have consistent data for all 140 kids. We may have it for 100, but we don't have 140 Ellis kids. We don't arrive with exactly the same kind of data on them. Now, we do have some outlier transfers and people like that, we can't help that. But the NEWA scores give us a real solid, this is, these are what our kids did on that particular day in that area. Now, some kids we know blow the test off and things, but you can find it easier when that kid's in your class and look and say, what do you mean you scored this bad? I know you can do better than that. I blew it off. And then you know at least what it came from. So that's why we're pushing the NEWA test very early in the year with our freshmen, so we get the data back right away. And it's, like I said, it's live time data, so they get it really, really quickly, and they get it in a usable form like Patty said. Brenda's really looking to get these, the score sheets that you would have gotten on the NEWA was like a 2-page rundown. The data she's looking for is even more in depth, and it's not even that expensive, if I remember right. It's
No,
pretty cheap to
It
get.
is, yeah.
If it's available, I can't remember if it's actually available or not, but she's looking at it.
Okay, is there any other data that we are still waiting for?
The only thing I would think we're waiting for is the SAS science test, which I haven't seen any scores on yet.
That's part of the embargoed mess.
SAS.
Statewide assessment,
Is that
so
what it is?
New Hampshire NHSAS statewide assessment system. And part of the embargoed mess that to be determined, I
Yeah.
guess.
And this is only ninth and 10th grade,
It's only gonna
scores,
be-
there are PACE scores for the rest of the district, is that?
Part of the embargo.
Embargo. Yeah, so we should be seeing that at some point.
I'm hoping, yeah, and when I talk about, what's going on at the state, rest assured that every district is calling and emailing and trying to find out what's going on up there. Because the department is not functioning the way any of us are used to. We're not getting information from them, it's hard to get a hold of anybody, it's hard to get a hold of people even to find out about certification questions. Not even to do with student data, so the whole department, it's like, imagine if it was Department of Motor Vehicles and you couldn't get your license renewed, that's what this is like, it's just a mess, so.
Is that subject to change? It was a new commissioner?
He's been in for quite a while, I
Yeah, I don't
don't
think
know
it's
what's, I don't
necessarily
think it's that,
commissioner.
I don't know what's going on, so.
Right, okay, well, we have no control over it.
There's been a lot of turnover
There has
in the
been.
department in the last 2 years across the board. Most of the names we get emails from them, I don't even recognize the names, so that just tells you it's just a lot of new people and they're changing roles and that's, it's fine, any organization goes through some level of that, but.
It's a big unknown for us right now, we're not used to that, so.
Thank you. Anything else on that before we move on to item 2? Which is, our subcommittee goals for this year. I had tried to capture, what we talked about in our last meeting, in different bullet points here that I listed on the agenda. Does anyone have any feedback?
You developed 4 goals based on what we talked about last meeting?
On the agenda that I sent out, I had bullet pointed what we talked about. If you have the agenda, I can read off what they were. The first one I wrote, the first one listed here was develop end-of-year benchmarks for each grade level, K through 6, in reading, writing, and math. Number 2 was explore the possibility of piloting a new math program. 3, select a new reporting system to replace the current report card. And I added 4 videos because there was a little side discussion on whether we wanted to get some videos on our YouTube channel. So I just sort of put that on there, if that was a goal that we wanted to this year. Do those capture what we discussed? You see, are raising your eyebrows and
Well,
frowning at me, so I guess
I-
you don't think so.
no. Well, I can't say that we didn't discuss it, but I'm not sure that I, as a member of this committee, is in a position with enough expertise to set benchmarks with grade levels K through 6 in any subject area. And I'm not sure that's within our purview.
So our
I'm
committee
concerned about
would work with our administrative liaisons here, and these guys would really be doing all the work. And they would report to us, and the goal by the end of the year is to have, to have a report from the administration on how you have done on this. That's pretty much how we functioned in the past.
Okay,
So
all
just,
right.
I guess
And then, but we have a mouthful here. Is my next point. Even if we successfully develop those benchmarks, assuming they're not already in place somewhere, we just.
they're not, because that's why I assume they're not, because that's what this is one that Tom suggested at our last
Okay.
meeting, so.
Alright, and, again, how do we pilot a new math program? That to me comes from administration. And I'm not sure what we need is a new math program as opposed to more intervention to bring the kids up to catch them up.
Jamie?
I'm sure we need a new math program, I have no doubts whatsoever. This is about everyday math, it's not just about any math program, it's about the entry-level everyday math program, and I have zero doubts that needs to be replaced with a new math program.
Well, we had talked about, if I remember correctly, we talked about the fact that the kids really haven't got the basic skills. They can't compute. Am I correct in that? That's really the
And
focus
part
was
of
that.
that,
I'm not disagreeing with you, Jim, because our math scores are in the 12. I totally agree with you, and that has to be addressed. That alone is a huge project, because I don't mean to be simplistic, but if the kids are having difficulty with their fractions and multiplications, there's no way in hell they're gonna do algebra. And if they can't do algebra, there's no way in hell they're gonna do geometry or calc or any other advanced math. So it goes back to what are we doing to help them in the lower grades in particular, to make sure that they're successful with math.
Mhm.
Because if we don't start there, the rest of it, you just throw the rest of it out.
And I think from the discussions that we had was the current math program of everyday math does not provide the foundational basis
Correct.
necessary
Yep.
for these students to be able to then excel.
Okay.
And that it was time to relook at that, and I believe the discussion was, should we have that be the goal that it's replaced? In the comment back from the administration was, well, we hope to get a pilot going, but replacing it all is a big bite, and we would like to look at getting a pilot program, but I don't think there was a lot of disagreement on strengthening the foundational program, and that involved.
And I don't disagree with that either.
Which is why I
Changing from
worded
everyday
it, that's
math.
why I worded it the way I did, I didn't say by the end of the year we're gonna have this done, because we discussed that. and
there's
it
more
was-
information
it was
coming out, yeah,
an
and
agreement that wasn't possible, that was
it
not
might
an
be a whole
objective.
new program for next year, it might be a new program in certain grades but not others. There's a lot of ways we can go with that. What we're looking at, and I just had a meeting today about this with, my district math, coordinator, is that we're looking at figuring out how to address the developmental issues at each span, so like K through developmental, what are those issues, 3-5 issues, and then like 6 through 12, there are different needs that are, in place. So probably not a whole new math program K-12, but definitely making sure that we strengthen foundational pieces and figuring out what goes from there.
I took a pilot program like a whole new way of approaching things, and that's not what I see. I see us going back to basics of math, number one, right back at the elementary level, and that's where it needs to start. Because by the time they're in with Brian up here, we're too late.
Which with everyday math would mean a whole new program, because Jamie's right, everyday math doesn't do it,
I
The
got
way
you.
our
I
kids
did
need it.
not
So-
understand. Okay.
it's not the baby out with the bathwater, but
Gotcha.
it's certainly the bathwater out.
And if
We
you,
need new bathwater.
well, yeah,
Definitely.
and if
Yes.
I could say
A
so,
lot of dirt in there, okay.
2 years ago, I guess, I chaired, a teacher-based committee that the district had where we looked at math a little bit. That came out as one of the recommendations from the teachers as well,
Yeah.
that they wanted to see the math programs K-8 looked at. So I think, Jamie, you're right on point with what the teachers are thinking too. I think you're all saying the same thing, just in different ways,
Okay.
honestly, is the
Well, we need
outside.
something to argue about, for God's sake.
Well,
And of course, I show up right at the moment.
No,
when it
yeah,
occurs.
no.
As always.
so, but I guess my point is, we're not really arguing, because we're all actually saying the same thing.
We all want, we want to improve those math scores. That to me is a goal in and of itself if you do nothing else, number one.
But
Yeah, but that's
it's also,
huge.
yeah, it's also just I think, and sometimes new math programs get a bad rap. Really what people are looking for is for kids to use math tools in different ways and understand how to interpret their world, right? Like, you said something beautifully earlier that nobody else in the room probably picked up on, because they weren't math teachers, where you
Nobody accuses me.
No. You said it was a step function thing. You called something a step function, and I said, man, how many high school kids would I wish would be able to take something in the real world and say, hey, that's a good example of a step function. See, that's taking the math to the next level that we want all the kids to do at all levels. You know, I pull my hair out, as I'm sure you do, working with your kids at home on homework, because you can see the bigger picture. They can't always see the forest through the trees, and you want them to, because that's how they're really gonna have the appreciation for math and then be able to excel in it, right? So how
I
do we
take him
get
just memorizing his multiplication tables.
Well, yeah, there are those
My
days
kid
too.
struggled with that, and that's what Ellie's kind of getting at, is that those foundational pieces, the way I described it, I think, on the phone to you yesterday, Jamie, was that the core of math is not very different than the core of reading.
Right.
If you don't have your alphabet, you can't learn the sight words, then you can't read, you can't get the movie going. Well, I think the problem with math was that in the past, you practiced rote skills, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, to the point of death by rote skill.
Yeah.
So developers of programs saw good results when they took kids who had been through those rote skills and had them apply some things in a creative way, but they went too far with it. So what I'm saying is we need to have a process that has kids get the rote skills, but then they also learn, when it's developmentally appropriate, how to apply them to real world problems.
And that's,
So it's both,
and that's
right?
what the conversation I was having today with Donna Donnell about. There's a different issue at K2 in what they need compared to what they might need at 3 through 5, and what they're gonna need and what they're gonna need at 6 through 10. We need to put different things into place, and so one thing is not gonna solve it all. It's like you go into the doctor's with a headache and a rash. The doctor's not just gonna say, here's your Advil, it's gonna take care of everything. The Advil's gonna address the headache, the ointment's gonna address the rash. So we're looking at it as being more of a, I don't know, customized sort of approach to doing this. We're not looking for the magic, you know.
So how do we go forward on this project?
So as far as wording that goal, is that what you're looking to see?
Well, wording it so that we're all on the same page would be helpful, number one. And number two, you need to have some kind of outline. If as a board member, I wanna know, if a parent asks me, what are you guys doing about the crappy math scores? I'll be able to say, well, this is what the Eisa committee has done.
Yep.
Do this, and this. You've got 4 steps, 3 steps, or 3 objectives. That to me is one concrete goal
Yep.
with measurable
Yep.
achievements.
Right,
And I think that's important that
Yep.
we establish that. That's what I wanna see.
Yep.
For example, on that particular one.
so probably by the end of the school year, which would be June, have developed a plan to implement improved math instruction. What that's gonna look like, we don't know yet. We don't know if it's a program, we don't know if it's 3 programs. It could be something completely different, but have a plan in place to improve the math instruction. It's probably going to be something that's programs, it's probably going to be at the elementary little kid level, it's gonna be, you know, blocks and things, I mean, who knows? They're counting bears, all that stuff, but they're not gonna work with counting bears in 4th and 5th grade.
As an administrator in charge of curriculum, you can't say to the, I'm gonna guess 3rd grade teachers, every kid will learn how to do multiplication tables.
That's part of what the benchmarks are, that's in the earlier goal.
But you gotta have short-term goals
Absolutely,
and long-term.
absolutely.
And I want to be able to go to that March district meeting and say, yes, we have responded to that major concern.
Yep.
And it should be a major concern for all of us.
Yep.
Regardless of what stakeholder position we
Yep.
have.
Yep.
And so that's the type of thing I want to be able, as a board member, to report out on.
Yep.
As we go through the budgeting process and so, because it's gonna come up. It's gonna come up even to the regular budget process.
Yep.
And we should be prepared with an action plan.
And I think we're all in agreement, because Tom and I have talked, and I've talked to my math coordinator, that everyday math is out the door at the end of the year. We are doing something different.
See, I
What
guess,
that's going to be is beyond me, but like liver and onions is not on the menu anymore.
but I'm gonna say, see, to me, everyday math is what I had, and that's not what you guys are telling me. That's not what these kids are
Well,
getting.
the program is called Everyday
No, there's a
Math.
program called
Right.
Everyday Math that was
It's
developed in
not.
Chicago. It's not what you have.
It's not,
Oh, no.
No, it's
No.
it's
Yeah.
not, and that's what I'm gathering.
Yeah,
You
no,
use
yeah.
that term, and that's not what I hear.
Thank you,
it's-
Ellie.
It's not what, yeah.
That's what, yeah, you're
Everyday
right.
Math is the name of the program, and it
It
sounds
sucks.
nice.
Sounds
Right.
nice.
It sounds really good. Every day they're gonna do math. What would be behind that? But it's way too abstract for our kids, which is why we're looking developmentally at. The kindergarten kids need to be able to put one-to-one correspondence and count out the
So in
buttons.
the last 25 years, we've gone even more far out in these new.
Yeah.
Because of what Tom was saying about them going straight from concrete to everything's application. We've gotta find this happy medium. Finding a happy medium for our kids is gonna look different. Younger kids,
Okay.
middle level kids, older kids, the happy
Right.
medium is gonna be something, and
I
then,
mean-
once you find the happy medium, you can go in either direction for the kids.
When we started this conversation with the high school teachers a year and a half ago, it started in the same way, it was what do we want our kids to learn? Wasn't so much, let's pick a program, in
No.
fact, they didn't pick a program. They ended up building their own program where they pulled in different pieces from different programs. And again, for instructional tools, added some other layers with some other digital supports too.
Which they can do at the high school level because they're specializing in one subject. We wouldn't want any of the elementary teachers who are
Right.
trying to do everything to do that.
Right.
So we wanna put into place pieces that are going to help them achieve those goals without them having to reinvent the wheel while they're also teaching reading, while they're also teaching phonics, teaching writing, teaching science, teaching social studies. And oh, by the way, let's also figure out how to get them to walk in a line nicely, figure out where to hang up their coat and everything else that they do during the day. So
But
it's a
they're
lot.
magicians, don't you?
I know.
Well, that's the thing is that it really, and I think Dawn wanted to share something, but you're the chair, may I speak? Because we're just going
We're everywhere.
kind of crazy. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm asking you, you're the chair of this meeting, may I? Okay, I'm only asking because we really are kind of reeling a little bit, and are we on topic? I don't wanna go even deeper.
We're verging on off topic, but.
Okay, you,
A little bit, I was
let me
supposed to-
know, and I am sorry I was a little bit late, I had something come up and I was flying over here. It's not like my office is right upstairs anymore, but
Well, look at me.
I was looking at you to be funny. Actually,
I would have left you upstairs in a closet.
Yeah, I know you would. Oh, God, I think my wife would too. But no, I think that oh shoot, we're videotaping these now, I forgot. Okay, so please don't share that with my wife.
Okay.
When I get her number, you're.
Oh, I'm in trouble, oh God. I think I wanted to go down the road of taking the best practices that I know and that we're learning about from Columbia and apply them to math. Because I know that just right work is really important. And when I say just right work, I mean that we recognize that the students are in different places. They should be working on their level independently. Patty didn't know, Patty felt like she wanted to do some research on some approaches that are out there right now before I asked Sanborn to create our own math program. Math is a problem nationally, and I feel that with the quality of our staff and our forward thinking, we really could develop a math program here that meets the needs of our students based on our data, right? That's really the approach that I'm looking at. But Patty found a woman who's in Portland, ironically, Portland, Maine, who has been working really hard to bridge workshop instruction into math. So we're gonna have a phone conversation with her. We're gonna talk and work with her, but I want you to know that I want to do this right. And when you do something this big right You have to first research the different modalities or options that are available. Look at the student data, what our kids don't know, what do they know, and then try to find a modality that's gonna work with our student. I really wanna start with student data. What is the information? How are our kids performing on NWEAs? How are they performing on state assessments? What is all that information telling us are the common issues? And then what are we gonna do about that? Not the other way around, I'm not going for a one-time buy it, fix all program approach. So when Patty says that we're investigating programs, I wanna make sure everyone understands that there are different types of programs. We're investigating instructional approaches that meet our kids where they are and move them forward in steps that are reasonable. And that is a very complex problem that I feel our staff can handle. But the first step is figuring out which way we want to go in terms of professional development and then providing that professional development. And the cycle is relatively simple. You provide the professional development, they implement the instructional practices, we look at the student data and see if it made a difference. If it didn't make a difference, we revise and try it again. If it did make a difference, we go on to the next problem. It's that simple. But that's a lot of work when you're talking about a 4th grade teacher who teaches reading, writing, math, and science to do that across 4 disciplines. So I have directed Patty, we're working on writing because writing gives us the instructional practices to pull over to reading and math. So Columbia is steeped in 30 to 40 years of research in these best practices in teaching. I want teachers to learn those things and move them. Plus, writing just gets neglected naturally. And in the future, writing is going to be critical. When you think just about texting and emails, how much writing has made a comeback in 10 years, it's incredible.
But they're not literate.
Well, yes, some are and some aren't, you're right.
If you read emails or texts, it's a whole new language that's been developed.
Yep.
That doesn't make the student literate.
CUATTHSKL. See you at the school. I got a 14-year-old.
Okay, so just so, because we only have about 15
Thank
minutes
you,
left. So just to keep us on, our discussion right now is on goals. And Patty suggested, I guess, a revision to our number 2. Have developed a plan to improve math instruction is the goal that I heard you suggest for our math goal number 2.
That way we're not stuck saying a program because it might not be a program, it might be several programs, if we get too specific, then we're stuck with specificity and that can hurt as well as help.
So what we will be looking at our monthly, committee meetings is the information, the reports of status reports, how that's coming, what directions are you going in, what are you thinking? If that's.
I love that.
Does everybody comfortable with that one?
Very much so.
Okay, so back to number 1, were we okay with that? That was Tom's goal, he suggested that.
Which one was it again?
End of year benchmarks for each grade level K through 6 in reading, writing, and math.
I think that's a lot.
That's
Okay.
what
You
I
might
was
want to
saying.
shoot for math only if you're doing your math goal.
I'd like to focus on the math.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, we
That's
need your
our
help.
biggest area.
And it's an area of passion for Jamie too, I know, and that's good because he has a kid who's going through it. Right? So he gets the parent hat on the committee as well, which I would appreciate because I know as a parent having them come
He
home.
does a lot more than the parent now, but that's beside the point.
I'm being nice.
Not gonna go there.
Yeah.
So is everyone comfortable with that as a goal to develop end of year benchmarks
Yeah, because that would be a
for
good,
each
that
grade
would be a
level
key piece
in
in.
math K through 6?
And they're compatible, I think the first one and the second one now are compatible, one sort of
Feeds
supports
into
the
the
other, right?
Correct, I agree.
Okay. Did you had something to share?
No, I was just, when you guys were talking about everyday math, I was just saying, I think, I said as Patty, everyday math there's a lot of language based. So it's really challenging for kids that struggle with reading. So it's a very difficult program because it's not just math, there's a lot of reading too.
But then you get into work problems with math, that if you're not up to your language skills, you can't solve a math problem that you have to read. With words,
And
not
that starts
numbers.
in the early
That's a great question. Everyday math, I think, was before I started here, 2 years before. So
Became really
let's say
popular about 15 years ago.
2004,
I think is when we started piloting it here, and then I think 2005, the decision was made to start onboarding at K-5. Grade 6, it never, yeah,
A lot.
15 years,
It's a lot.
Yeah,
15 years,
my
yeah.
son's class just missed it, I'm pretty sure he was 2014.
Yep.
I think they just missed it, and my daughter's class did not just miss it, I believe.
Right.
It's the and I found it extremely frustrating and awful.
And when they,
Just
when
did
they,
not
when
like
they
it.
rolled it out, it came in grade by grade, so there was a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would make sense for the kids, because it would have been
She was
between.
2018.
Yeah,
So,
so that would make sense.
so I'm on board also. All right, and so our third was to select a new reporting system to replace the current report card. Is that too aggressive, or is that a plan that
Well-
are we in line with what you had planned to do this year?
We've got the pilot going on right now with some of our teachers, so I don't think that there's anything out of line with that. Different system.
I thought we had
Grade
talked about,
reporting.
I remember Mr. Ambrose over there, was to, help parents understand what we had before we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, I think that, let me just, there's a difference between changing our grading and instructional practices and changing the system with which we report them.
Okay.
And I'm encouraging us to start by changing the system with which we report them
Okay.
and educate parents about that. But I think that if that's gonna be a committee goal, I think the committee goal should be to explore new grading options. Because we might get through this pilot and be like, no, this is bad, and then it's March.
Explore reporting
And
systems.
then we need to explore, then you know what I'm saying? We have work going on with a company right now called Motivus. And I think that if this would be a committee goal to explore that, I would like them to come and present right away to you, to get feedback. Because if the feedback is the teachers that are using it, or you,
Yeah.
Brian, or
Yeah.
not the company.
No,
But I want you guys, like, we talked about, I have a vision for this, so I wanna talk about it briefly, Tammy, and then
I'm just trying
to change, you know,
to rephrase
but
the-
Yep, no, the
So
key, this has 3 key components. Parents need to know 3 pieces of information. Where is my child with regard to benchmarks? Where is my child with regard to their peers academically at this point in the year? And sometimes that can be part of a narrative. It doesn't necessarily mean a score, but there's a huge difference between my son not doing well in one area of math and everyone else is fine, versus my son not doing so well in an area of math and everyone else, we're working on this as a class, right? That's very different.
Yes.
And then the third thing is, what can I do to help my child? Regardless if they're, at the very tippy top of the class in academics, what can I do to support them? If they're in the middle, if they're in the bottom third, or they're struggling, every parent wants to know, what is my child working on and how can I help them? So there's going to have to be some kind of a narrative component to whatever system we use. And so it's gonna be really important to figure out, that's not so hard when you have 20 kids in your classroom. It's a major problem when you have 120. To offer that level of narrative 120 times. So the question is, can we have some, for the 6 through 12 portion, some preloaded comments that give a general sense of those things, and then maybe a little bit of personalized information. But it's also important to recognize that grade reporting systems are not intended to give a parent every single detail of the picture. They're designed to create a conversation between the professional and the parent. So when I get my son's report card and everything's going smooth in 5 classes, you can bet I'm gonna call the one that it's not going well in and ask them what's going on, right, as a high school freshman. But in elementary school, we have parent conferences. So that really serves the purpose of preparing the parent for the parent conference or preparing questions. There should be no surprises on a grade report. No one should find out their kid is failing or struggling on a grade report. They should know about it way before that. And they should get a phone call from the school. They should work to support them prior to that. So I just want to make sure that we manage our expectations of what grade reporting can really do. The problem that we're having right now is that some parents feel like they don't understand the grading system. I feel like it's the way that it's coming home. When I read the report card, it's pages It's just too much information. I don't even need to know all that for my son. I wanna know, are you at benchmark or not in reading? And what do I need to do to help you out? If you're not at benchmark in reading, what area do you need help with, and how do I go to the school and learn how to do that for you? So that's what I'm thinking in terms of vision, right? And it would look different 6 through 12 than K through 5 or K through 6, 7 through 12, because of the sheer number of comments and whatnot. And so Patty's working with Brian and Motivist to kind of do this pilot. But I just want to make sure everyone knows that if the pilot doesn't fit that vision, then we need to talk about it more, right?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I think it will, because the Motivus is simply the company that's gonna develop what we want it to be. And I think what you're saying is, and I kind of agree, I think the goal for you guys would be more, what information do we want to be going home with for parents on?
Depth.
Right, what information, what's the right amount of information, what is the information? And it might be that that's layered too. There's a front page or a front screen, or however you wanna look at it, that gives you 3 things. There's a more detailed view for when you need that. That to me would be, I think, really valuable for this group to take on, because that's a piece that we're gonna struggle with as we're working with Motivus, because we're looking at it through the educator lens.
We know the input.
We need
You are the out.
yes, the output end is incredibly important, and that's not something that we have as much data on. And I can speak as being a parent myself having kids, but that's just one viewpoint.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Would putting a survey to parents be beneficial to find out what parents are looking for,
Yeah, what information, right?
As we, yes, once we get our goal.
I just wanted to elaborate on the goal a little bit, Tammy. If I'm comfortable
Yeah.
with the way it was worded, as long as it's exploring, not definitely adopting, because what if we explore and we don't feel good and we need to have a little more time to I'd like it done by the end of the year. I want to be clear about that. I would like a change done for next September. If we want to set that as a goal and then we don't meet it, fine, right? Like, we're trying.
Explore a new reporting system to replace the current report card, and do we wanna add something about, make some determinations on what is the information that should be distributed to parents?
And get community input from parents as to what information should be
But
shared.
that's not a goal, that's,
Yeah, that's an action
That's
step,
part-
thanks, yeah, you're right.
okay, so at this point, do we wanna vote on these goals?
No, I
At
still
this
have
meeting, or
comments.
should we wait
I
to
haven't
that?
been able to say it. I still have
Jamie's
comments.
chomping a bit.
Yeah, I just wanna, because we're getting, short on time.
Okay.
So we're talking about the output side of it, and here's some issues that I have with the output side of it, that I don't know what the explanation is. I've asked you, has not been able to be identified for me. The difference between an E and a P are the following words, and only the following words. One of them says analyze and synthesize. The other says apply and transfer. I have no idea what that means. I don't know how analyze and synthesize is different and distinct from apply and transfer.
So Jamie, what you're saying is that clarifying the language is one component of the grade reporting, but I don't know that that relates to the goal.
No, but
You're going way deep right now.
and it's my time, so.
I'm just saying that that's the work.
Yeah,
And so
Yeah,
we
I
just
just
talked,
wanna clarify, I'm just trying to understand.
and we just talked about the outputs and what it means and the ability to communicate. I've had people tell me, and I know for a fact, that when you ask some of these questions about why is the child getting a P rather than an E, some of the answers that are told to parents are, we don't do E in this class yet. Which I find to be an odd answer. So if you're talking about reporting out, those types of statements, those types of outputs would not be considered to be very helpful from a parent perspective.
That's horrible to hear.
Yeah, it's
Right.
because they.
That needs, can we just talk about that separately? Can you call me? Because that's really concerning, and you too. I'd like to hear about that. I don't wanna wait to hear about that, right? I wanna deal with that.
You don't.
That's the point.
Right, and that's the point, is that people need to know what people are talking about. It needs to be in usable language, but I'm willing to come and talk about just report cards at the next meeting, right? And I think that might be a good idea, because we gotta bifurcate this a little bit. These are huge goals. They're big, right? Some districts, their primary goal for an entire year would be redoing a report card.
I agree.
We are looking at a math program, a report card, and reorganizing the entire district. So I just wanna be careful
We'll
about
do it in the
capacity.
afternoon.
You want it done by tomorrow.
That's when we take our nap. We're talking about
Right.
naps.
Look,
That's the nap.
The naps are only 20 minutes.
Right.
So what would be
Just
helpful for
saying.
me is if anyone has, language that they think would be really useful in distilling these into goals, because I took a stab at it, and I'm perfectly happy to take input from everyone else
Well, the
for our
first,
next meeting,
I thought
which
we
we know in the
were
next
all
meeting.
set with it. I mean,
We're not with number 3, it sounds like. So we'll vote on these at our next meeting. So if anyone has any, this is on the report card one, the first two I think we're good at first.
the first two were, pretty good, but I think on 3, explore alternative reporting systems and how, I think we have to, in deference to Jamie and the relevance of the output, that really sucks. You can't-
So. if
I didn't
someone
say
wants to
those.
stab that,
I-
I'm
It's
perfectly-
not, it's not the other words, so stop it.
I wanna move on to portrait of a graduate before we leave this room.
Okay, can we cross off videos? Can we cross off videos? I don't think, we don't know.
I just put a question mark, it sounded like there was some mention that videos might be a goal that someone had, but I'm perfectly happy not
Okay,
to.
I'm not interested in pursuing, I think these other 3 things are so huge that we'll never get to video, so don't even put it on yet.
Okay,
We're
portrait of
ready.
a graduate?
So, I did email the subcommittee the revisions to the portrait of the graduate. And these revisions were put together based on input through surveys, based on input, in different correspondence that came from folks on the board, the whole school board. And what we have now is 6 sections. Does anyone need a copy, because I do have extra copies.
I have a draft that you sent out on the 14th.
Let me pass these around.
It's dated as of 9/26/19 on the bottom.
Oh, no, it's a 10:15.
That's the old one.
There's a 10-15 revision.
It just came out, like, maybe yesterday. Maybe
Yeah, it was
yesterday.
yesterday.
10:15, I guess, yesterday.
So there's a copy
Thank
coming
you.
around, it's got a draft stamped all over it.
Yeah.
And we basically got 6 sections now, and there's bullets underneath each section. And I'll be explaining at the board meeting today the process that we went through and all the stakeholders who were involved. But our 6 basic sections are this: academically prepared, and there's some definition about that. Personally responsible, and there's some information about that beneath there. Creative and innovative, globally aware, communicator, and resilient. So we've really refined and distilled this down so that, all the sections are pretty much equal with 3 bullets each. Trying to keep it so that it's simple, not overly wordy, so that it can be understood and interpreted easily.
But you said you changed some of these from the last time?
We did have to change some of them from last time, so the section on academically prepared is brand new. And then there was a revision made, the initial one that went out, in September that we solicited input on a survey. Globally aware was global citizen, and personally responsible was self-aware.
You didn't like global citizen?
We had, some comments that there were concerns with that term.
I have concerns, well, I can tell you about that.
Yeah.
So in my mind, global citizen is a political phrase. It has certain connotations. Those connotations are usually on the left end of the political spectrum. There is organizations called Global Citizen that have a trademark to that organization. If you read their website, they're involved in things that I don't know what we support. I think that by saying global citizen, part of what you're doing is you're saying, well, not American citizen. Well, why not American citizen? Well, global citizen. You go to Wikipedia, one of the things it says in Wikipedia is a global citizen primarily associates with their role as a member of the globe, and their member as a nation or a community is subservient to that position. I don't subscribe to that. We're talking about something that's going to be the North Star of our students. I don't think we should have what I believe are politically loaded phrases in there. So I was opposed to it.
Oh, I agree with Jamie. I mean, I also, that was also my feedback. It's just a phrase. It's not necessary. It's globally aware is as descriptive as globally.
But you weren't there at that presentation, that full day workshop. I guess, I never saw that. I certainly didn't see a left-wing definitely not
But why do
political.
we need to introduce that when we can rephrase it in a different way?
Well,
They're just, it
a
was,
citizen, I mean, our world has changed. We're no longer, it's not just Sanborn, it's not just New Hampshire even. Our lives are global.
Right,
Our
so
lives are truly
we would
global.
want our graduates to be globally aware.
I don't like that phrase too much either, though.
Do you have another way to suggest?
Let's, well, I'm not gonna go any further,
said
because we're
that.
gonna talk about
I
this
go through it.
at the board meeting, but there was no political intent for sure, and I guess I just didn't see that coming. I didn't see that at all. And, politically, I'm not a socialist by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm not to the left wing, and to me, a global citizen is someone who is other-oriented, is looking at the bigger picture, because everything we do, from the phones we live with, the computers, everything is global now. It's not concentric to our local position. And I want to see our students have a broader perspective. That's why I support field trips. I mean, it's like.
Well, I don't,
it's
I agree with all
holiday.
those statements.
Okay, well, I just didn't see
I
it.
disagree with the wording for the reason.
Okay, well, let's see what our colleagues.
I can send references too if you want to check them.
I-
Not me, you already know my.
Do we have any
Foot
feedback?
links.
Okay. No, do we have any feedback from our committee that we want to give to our administrators before they make this presentation, or are we?
So, well, what I had sent to Patty earlier was, my understanding, and from talking with Tom, is what we're really looking to do is, it is a global world that our students are gonna have to compete in.
That's correct.
And how do we get them to understand that this is a global world, and how do you properly interact with a global world to interact with it?
And can I just ask Ellie, Dawn, Patty, and Brian, is that correct? Because I wasn't there that day when you developed that, but my understanding is that having, well, did what Jeannie just said make sense? I'm just trying to understand myself, because I was speaking to Jeannie myself as to what I view, not for the committee.
The purpose was that our kids be able to function in the world that we live
Okay.
in,
Be
which is
an
now
active
global.
participant, which is why citizen,
And which
Yeah,
could
that's-
also responsibility,
Yeah.
voting,
That's where the word citizen
That's where it
came
came
from.
from.
It was that service piece.
yeah,
It
not
was
just being aware of it, but
being,
being part of it.
being an active participant in it, showing up to committee meetings.
Now, I need to say, in all fairness, I had no idea about this whole left wing thing.
Oh, I
until
didn't
told me. I didn't know anything about it, and I looked it all up, and
right.
he's right, I've already checked his
Say
references.
that louder.
Yeah, I know, you guys say that
You're
enough.
right, a lot of times, Jamie.
But, yeah, here's what I had suggested.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tam's trying to get that out. The ability, so what we want is the ability to compete in the global marketplace. How do you do that? You positively interact with others in a respectful manner. You collaborate effectively to achieve goals. You actively listen to other perspectives. You are polite, professional in interactions with all people, groups, communities in the global marketplace. And that's what I sent to Patty, and she asked for any comments on the situation. I also very much like, and I think I did in the very, very first survey that I sent in. But I very much like having the academically prepared at the top of the list. I thought that was a wonderful adjustment.
And I have to say that came about in part because of a conversation with Tammy, but also just being explicit that the portrait of a graduate builds from our definition of student success in the sense that they work in tandem. That everybody's got different goals, right? Like different kids need different things and we need to address them as a whole student and academically. So I think the problem is that there's been so much conversation, particularly in this organization, about dealing with the whole student and not academically, that it has become an either or, not an and. And in my mind, it's and.
See, I assume that being academically prepared is what we do to no matter what.
Exactly,
Everything
that's a
else
non-negotiable.
goes on.
But
Exactly.
if this document is being described as the North Star from which you're going to back plan your, curriculum and instruction, you have to have academics on here, I just.
Yeah.
I feel
I'm not
that was
objecting.
No one disagrees
I'm
with
not
that. We all
objecting
feel
to that
good.
at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, to me, I assumed being academically prepared was part of the portrait of a graduate. I didn't think
Well, So
necessarily.
we shouldn't make it explicit.
Yep.
Make the
I'm
obvious
not
explicit,
disagreeing with you,
someone said that,
Tammy, I'm
just
not
say that.
disagreeing, I'm saying I don't have a problem with it being there. But I did assume that was our basis as an organization and as an institution. That's what our job is to academically prepare our kids. And this just makes it a broader picture of what we expect our kids to look like when they finish this year.
And I think that's why we didn't put academically prepared or anything to do with academics on here, is because that's a given.
I agree.
A student that leaves here is academically prepared. They have the academics. That's a given. It doesn't need to be said. So that's why it didn't get put on here from the beginning.
I don't object to it, but you and I definitely didn't. But we were also, it was a fabulous experience to work with everyone.
And just a side note too, when it came to the sheets that came from the community, not anywhere on there did academics come up, because they know the students are gonna leave in education. Not one place did any of the community members put academics, which is why we didn't feel it was necessary. So I'm not saying I disagree with being on there, but that's why we didn't go there.
And it doesn't hurt to have it there, to be more explicit.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Right, it
It's not-
eliminates
it's
any
not.
doubt for anybody,
That's correct.
so there's no problem,
Yeah.
that's easy.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
I personally don't have an issue with what, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
finish.
with what you were gonna title, the global citizen piece or globally aware, what I wasn't aware of, nobody wants a political slant one way or another,
I
so.
didn't expect, but.
Yeah, and that certainly wasn't the intent, so I don't think anybody who served on the committee is gonna have any issues with that whatsoever, retitling that. That makes sense,
Yeah,
you know?
that was not on anyone's radar.
No, absolutely not, no.
Here's another one, just Patty, for your, for wording and word connotations to probably somebody like me, might not apply to anybody else, but somebody like me. One of the things when you get into your FAQs, you had said, a portion of a graduate can serve as a North Star to drive transformation of traditional school models. I don't want to transform a traditional school model. I want to reinforce and build greater, better foundations in the traditional manner. I don't want to transform it. When I read that reads to me, we're trying to get rid of the basics at foundational levels, because there's a new way to do that. We have to transform away from what has worked in the past. That might not have been what you're intending when you're writing that, but that's how I'm reading it.
And that
That's
comes out
fair.
of all the literature that we had when we were developing this plan. So that stuff was not stuff that I wrote, it's stuff that came out of the literature from these different
Why schools go
organizations,
about
which
doing
is why
this
you
and
do
why,
this,
yeah.
right?
I'd like to talk in this group about that, but we don't have time right now.
Maybe we could add that to the agenda for next.
Absolutely,
How's that?
because,
What exactly are you? Yes,
Thank you.
we certainly can.
well, I just think it's great to be explicit about what we're still kind of healing as a community from a major change 2 years ago. And language like transformational education gets mixed up with not having academic rigor. And I want to talk about that. So this idea of transformational versus traditional, or Jamie, how did you say it? You said it, you don't want to transform. Say it
To
again.
me, when I read the words transformation from traditional models, to me, the traditional model is you do your multiplication tables, you
Right.
memorize. Yeah, memorization sucks, too bad, memorize. You need to know
So
that.
you use the S word now.
Oh, God, you separate the two of them next time?
So you need that, you need to be doing, basic math, you need to learn carry the ones,
Yeah.
I guess they call it regrouping now, that carry the ones in my day, but I mean, when I read transformation of the traditional model, I read that to me, we gotta do away with that stuff, we're so much beyond it, and.
Right.
It's,
Okay,
that's
so-
a troubling concept to me.
So Tammy, I don't care how you write it, but I wanna talk about that.
Okay.
Because there is transformation that has to happen, but it's not the way you're perceiving it.
Right.
But I understand your perception and agree with your perception based on where you're coming from, and I think that we can work through that as a team. And there's a lot more common ground here, but I know you now, and I know what you're thinking, and I know what they're meaning by transformational, and I understand that they're not this.
Yeah.
They're this. But showing you that is really important, right? And that's why, as tough as this week has been with this process, it's been great. Because some things have come out that are concerns that wouldn't have come out if we didn't do this, which is why people go through this process.
Exactly right.
So it's good,
Exactly
right? There's
right.
nothing, I don't have any problem with any of this, I just want time to talk about it
I agree with
and
you.
explore it. So if we're gonna have the next agenda be, let's talk about report cards, I think this lends itself right to that conversation, right? About
It gets back to language matters and interpretation of language, you have to try. to
Communication
structure as
matters.
best you can.
It's the communication piece, it's exactly what it is, because you could be saying the same exact thing, but exactly what you were saying, it's not this, it's this.
It's lenses.
It's just about understanding what the
Okay.
others,
And by the same
Perspective
token,
is-
you and I had a discussion when we first met about math and how what's happening is not what is needed for these kids, because their world is different. So I could see some transformation occurring. By the same token, we have to teach them differently because they learn different today.
But they
In some ways.
They still need some of those foundational
They
skills.
do need the foundation, they need to do the fractions and the multiplication table.
But they might need it for different reasons.
And they may need an app and a phone to teach them.
Can I
You
throw
see
two
what I'm
things?
saying?
Yeah.
I can't believe I sat here for 40 minutes without saying.
I'm impressed.
We didn't give you a chance.
The word you're looking for is continuous improvement, not transformation.
Perfect. That would work.
And the writing in this document that I've seen for the first time here tonight, I thought we were on the one that I worked on like 2 weeks ago, and now on this, I haven't seen this before. The writing doesn't line up, which will drive you bonkers. The first 4 bullets don't start with a verb ending in S. The rest of them do.
Yes, Bob.
You know where I'm coming from, Tom.
Yep.
Okay?
that's why.
And I
this
can
is
see
the
what
first
happened,
read.
somebody added the academic piece.
Yeah.
It's got more words than all the other sections,
Yes.
shocking. And it doesn't line up with the rest of the document. So I don't know when final versions are done, I graciously volunteer to rewrite. Okay, but I don't,
And he did a good job writing the last draft. That's what, I had actually pulled up the last draft and I was trying to crosswalk it to see where all the differences were. There aren't a ton.
No.
It's basically the academic piece and it's
That's why we
the,
didn't develop as a group.
what's
That
that?
came in, and that was
Correct.
not developed
Yep.
by the group.
Yep.
but if you look at the first 4 bullets, just forget the title headers. Every single one says makes, asks, demonstrates, applies, thinks, and it
Right,
should say
and action
contributes positively, somebody flipped it. Collaborates, recognizes, expresses, accepts, asks, rises, knows, moves.
Bob, draft away, baby.
Okay?
Go
So in other words,
Well, I
what you're
wanna see
saying
what, I don't know what's
is you
going on.
want
at
the
board meeting.
request to talk about the content, but not the grammar.
I wouldn't mess with the content, I just wanna line it up so that it
But
reads.
tonight is just a conversation, another chance for everyone to talk about their points of view and perspectives. Patty's gonna continue to work on it. We're not asking the board to adopt it tonight. We're asking,
Okay.
we're asking the board,
We're almost done.
we're asking the board to take a look at it just like you just did.
Yep.
Cause if you don't do it this way, I don't like the show it and approve it approach.
No.
I like a process of continuous improvement, like
No,
Bob
I
just
just-
said, this is good.
Give me a crack.
So Bob, yeah, take a crack at it.
Once they're done tonight.
Yeah, you'll hear tonight what's going on.
We're gonna have to adjourn,
I
was
got
there,
some-
do you have any public comment?
But thank you.